The CEO didn't just ignore him. She recoiled when his shadow fell across her desk, as if poverty was contagious. "Step back. You smell like chemicals." Vivienne Cross waved her hand dismissively, the $10,000 Cartier bracelet catching the light. "And don't put that filthy phone directly on my desk. Use a tissue." Actually, she looked at him for the first time, her eyes scanning his worn janitor's uniform with the kind of disgust usually reserved for roadkill. "People like you are exactly what's wrong with this country. No ambition, no education, just existing, taking up space that competent people could use." Russell Kane had survived things this woman couldn't imagine, had earned respect she'd never understand. But when she called him worthless, something inside him finally shattered. He slammed her phone onto the mahogany desk so hard the rose gold case exploded into pieces, and what fell out made her face drain of all color, something she'd kept hidden for over 20 years, something that connected them in a way she'd spent her entire life trying to forget. Russell Kane had learned to make himself invisible long before he started pushing a mop through the marble corridors of Crosstech Industries. 20 years as an Army medic had taught him that survival often meant becoming background noise until action was required. He'd been good at it, good enough to earn sergeant rank, good enough that 17 commendations decorated a box in his basement that he never opened. But that was before Afghanistan. Before the IED that killed 3 of his unit and left him with tinnitus ringing like church bells during quiet moments. Before the phone call from Kandahar, a chaplain explaining that his wife Rachel had been hit by a drunk driver on Route 44, that she died instantly, that he needed to come home to their 9-year-old daughter, who was alone in a hospital, waiting for a father 7,000 miles away. 4 years later, Russell was a janitor working night shifts for insurance that would partially cover Brooke's cerebral palsy surgery. $80,000, a number that might as well have been $8 million. He'd been teaching himself Python between shifts, building an accessibility app for kids like his daughter, because the existing educational software wasn't designed for children who struggled with standard interfaces. 4 years of watching Brooke's left leg drag slightly when she walked, of hearing other kids call her names he had to pretend not to notice, of working double overtime while telling himself that dignity wasn't about job titles, but about why you did what you did. 4 years of swallowing his pride, accepting that the janitor's uniform was just another kind of camouflage, making peace with being invisible to people who made more in a day than he made in a month. Tonight felt like every other Tuesday, until he found the CEO's phone by her desk. He was emptying the trash in Vivienne Cross's office when he saw the phone. It lay face down beside her desk, the rose gold case reflecting city lights that poured through floor-to-ceiling windows. Russell recognized it immediately. He'd seen the CEO clutching it during conference calls, pacing these halls with restless energy. The phone was expensive, probably cost more than his monthly rent. For a moment he considered leaving it, but the janitor's code was simple. You found something, you returned it. Invisibility didn't mean dishonesty. He picked up the phone carefully, intending to leave it on her desk with a note. That was when Vivienne Cross appeared in the doorway, her tailored suit immaculate despite the late hour. "What do you think you're doing?" Her voice cut through the silence like broken glass, sharp and accusatory. "Put that down immediately." Russell turned slowly, phone still in hand, and watched her face shift from suspicion to something uglier. She didn't see a veteran who'd served 20 years, didn't see a father working 3 jobs to save his daughter, didn't see a human being at all. She saw a janitor with his hand on her property, and in her world, that made him a thief until proven otherwise. "I found it by your desk, ma'am," Russell said quietly, his voice carefully neutral, in the way he'd learned during service years when a wrong word could cost everything. "I was returning it." "You were going to steal it," Vivienne interrupted, contempt dripping from every word. "That's what people like you do. I have security cameras, Everything is recorded. So before you spin some story about being helpful, know that I have evidence." Russell felt something cold settle in his chest. He'd been accused of many things: recklessness by commanding officers, emotional unavailability by Rachel during arguments about deployment, being a bad father by his own conscience every time he chose paying bills over being present, but never theft, never dishonesty. Those were the two things he'd built his life around when everything else had fallen apart. "I'm not stealing anything," Russell said, his voice harder now. "I found your phone and I'm returning it. That's all." Vivienne stepped into her office, maintaining distance as if proximity might contaminate her. She didn't extend her hand, didn't move closer. Just stood there radiating disgust, her eyes scanning him with the kind of assessment that reduced human beings to their economic utility. "You know what I see? Exactly what's wrong with this country. No ambition, no education. You're 50 years old." She glanced at his name badge. "Russell Kane, 50, and pushing a mop. What does that say about your choices?" Russell's hand tightened around the phone, his jaw clenched. He thought about Brooke asking him last week if he was ashamed of his job, if he was embarrassed when other parents asked what he did. He'd told her honest work was nothing to be ashamed of, that taking care of her was the most important job in the world, that dignity wasn't about titles or paychecks. But standing here, watching this woman look at him like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe, those words felt hollow. "You don't know anything about me," Russell said quietly. "I know enough. People in your position look for shortcuts, for easy money." She wrinkled her nose. "Is that smell coming from you? That chemical smell?" Russell looked down at his uniform, at the cleaning solution stains that never quite washed out, at the worn fabric testifying to 4 years of night shifts and double overtime. He thought about the smell that clung to him: bleach and ammonia and industrial soap, the perfume of poverty. He thought about how he'd shower twice after his shift, scrubbing until his skin was raw, trying to erase the smell before Brooke woke for school because he didn't want her to be ashamed of him. "It's from the cleaning supplies," Russell said, his voice emptied of everything except basic mechanics. "I apologize if it offends you. Step back, please. You're too close." Russell hadn't moved. He was standing 6 feet away, well within normal distance. But in Vivienne's world, proximity to poverty required the same caution as proximity to disease. "Ma'am," Russell said, and some part of him recognized he should stop talking, should just put the phone down and leave. Should remember that invisible people didn't challenge powerful people's assumptions. "I served in the United States Army for 20 years. I have a daughter with a disability who needs surgery that costs $80,000. I work this job because it provides good insurance and allows me to be home when she needs me. I'm not lazy. I'm not uneducated. I'm not whatever you've decided I am based on my uniform. I'm just a man doing his best with the circumstances life gave him." Vivienne stared at him for a long moment, expression unreadable. Then she laughed, short, sharp, humorless, the kind of laugh that was really just weaponized contempt. "The military, of course. You know what's funny? Every janitor, every security guard, every person in a dead-end job, they all have some story about how they used to be something. Used to be important, used to matter. But here's the truth, Russell Kane. The military didn't want you anymore. Whatever you think you were, whatever value you think you had, it wasn't enough. They let you go. And now you're here, cleaning up after people who actually contribute to society, who actually create value, who actually matter." Something inside Russell went very still. The tinnitus, the ringing that had plagued him since the explosion, suddenly seemed very loud. He thought about Jenkins, Rodriguez, Martinez, the 3 members of his unit who died when that bomb went off, who'd been evacuating civilians from a building intelligence said was clear. Thought about carrying Jenkins out first because he had 2 kids and a wife back home. Thought about going back for Rodriguez, even though the building was collapsing. Thought about how Martinez had looked at him with dying eyes and whispered, "Tell my mom I wasn't scared." Thought about the 17 commendations in that basement box, each marking a moment when he'd chosen someone else's life over his own safety. "You're right," Russell said, his voice deadly quiet now. "They discharged me after 20 years because I had physical and psychological damage from combat, because I'd spent 2 decades in war zones watching people die and occasionally being able to save some of them, because my hearing is damaged and I have PTSD and I'm not fit for active duty anymore. You're absolutely right about that." He stepped forward, closing the distance she'd tried to maintain, watching her eyes widen slightly. Not with recognition or empathy, but with the first whisper of fear, not of him specifically, but of what he represented, the possibility that invisible people might have history, might have every reason to stop being invisible. "And you're right that I clean up after people who contribute to society," Russell continued. "People like you, who fired 300 employees last quarter to boost stock prices, who threw a party that cost more than most people make in a year to celebrate hitting profit targets, who measure contribution by how much money you extract rather than how many lives you improve. You're right. I clean up after people like you. And every night, I go home and look my daughter in the eye and tell her that what I do matters because it keeps her safe, keeps her housed, keeps her moving toward a future where she won't have to choose between dignity and survival." Vivienne's face had gone pale, but her expression didn't soften. If anything, she looked angrier, as if Russell's refusal to accept his place in her hierarchy was personal offense. "How dare you," she said, voice low and dangerous. "How dare you stand in my office and lecture me about contribution, about value? You have no idea what it takes to run a company, to make hard decisions that keep thousands of people employed. You think you're noble for working a menial job to support your daughter? That's not noble. That's just existing. That's doing the bare minimum any parent should do. You want a medal for not abandoning your child?" "No," Russell said. "I've got 17 medals already. They don't pay for surgery. They don't make my daughter's classmates stop calling her a cripple. They don't change the fact that in your world, I'm invisible until I'm inconvenient. I don't want anything from you except basic human respect. The acknowledgement that I'm a person, not just the help. But apparently, that's too much to ask." He held out her phone, extending his arm across her desk. "Here, your phone. Undamaged. Not stolen. Returned by the janitor who's exactly what's wrong with this country." Vivienne didn't take it. She was staring at him with fury and disbelief, as if his defiance had broken some fundamental law. "Put it on the desk," she said coldly. "Don't hand it to me. I don't know where your hands have been. Use a tissue from that box, wrap it first, and then get out of my office. I'm going to be speaking with your supervisor about your conduct. The way you've spoken to me is completely unacceptable. You should be grateful you even have a job. And instead, you're—" Russell slammed the phone onto her desk, not throwing it, not smashing it deliberately, but bringing it down hard enough that the impact echoed through the office like a gunshot. Hard enough that the rose gold case cracked along its edge. Hard enough that Vivienne jerked backward in her chair with a gasp that might have been fear or outrage, or both. "I'm done being grateful for crumbs," Russell said, his voice still quiet but no longer careful, no longer measured, no longer swallowing the rage that had been building for 4 years of being invisible. "I'm done pretending that working myself into exhaustion for poverty wages is somehow my fault. I'm done accepting that people like you get to decide who matters and who doesn't, based on how much money they have. I served my country. I saved lives. I'm raising a daughter who's braver than you'll ever be, and I'm done letting people like you make me feel small. The case had split along its seam when it hit the desk. As Russell and Vivienne stared at each other across the mahogany surface, both breathing hard, both trembling with different kinds of fury, the case separated completely. Two small objects fell out, hitting the desk with sounds that seemed impossibly loud in the charged silence. A metal dog tag, tarnished and worn, with a chain that had been broken and crudely repaired, and a photograph, old and creased, its colors faded, but image still clear. Russell looked down at the dog tag first, at the name stamped into military standard letters, at the blood type, at the service number. Recognition hit him like physical force, like the concussive wave from an explosion, stealing his breath and making the room spin. He picked up the dog tag with shaking hands, turned it over, saw the inscription he'd had added after his third deployment, for those who can't speak for themselves. "Where did you get this?" The words came out hoarse, scraped raw. "This is mine. I lost this in Iraq, 21 years ago. Where the hell did you get this?" Vivienne had gone absolutely still. She was staring at the dog tag in Russell's hand with an expression that might have been terror or grief or something more complicated. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again without sound. Her hands gripped the edge of her desk so hard her knuckles went white. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, all contempt and authority drained away, leaving only something that sounded like anguish. "No," she said. "No, it's not. You can't be." Russell picked up the photograph with his other hand. The image swam in his vision for a moment, before resolving into clarity, into memory, into a moment from another lifetime. A field hospital in Mosul, March 2003. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, lying on a cot with IVs in both arms and bandages covering most of her torso. She was tiny, malnourished, her face bruised from blast trauma. But her eyes were open, staring at the camera with awareness that shouldn't exist in someone so young. The knowledge that death was close and might still win. Standing next to the cot, in desert camouflage, filthy with dust and blood, was a much younger Russell Kane. 21 years old, baby-faced, holding the girl's hand. His free arm was bandaged where they'd drawn blood, type AB negative. Rare enough that when the child had arrived hemorrhaging, Russell had been the only compatible donor available. He'd given 3 pints over 4 days, more than was safe, enough that he'd nearly collapsed himself. He remembered her name, Rasha. She'd told him that meant gazelle in Arabic, that her father had named her that because she'd been born running. Her parents had died in the bombing that destroyed half her neighborhood. Her older brother had died getting her to the hospital. She'd survived because a convoy of American soldiers had found her in the rubble, because a young medic named Russell Kane happened to have the right blood type, because sometimes chance aligned with choice in ways that saved lives. He'd stayed with her for 6 days, total, until she was stable enough to transfer to a refugee facility. She'd given him a bracelet woven from thread she'd pulled from her hospital blanket, tied it around his wrist, with fingers that barely had the strength to make knots. He'd given her his dog tag, told her it would keep her safe, told her that soldiers carried them so that, even if the worst happened, someone would know their name. Rasha, Russell whispered, and the name came out like a prayer, like an accusation. "You're Rasha." Vivienne closed her eyes. Tears slipped down her cheeks, tracking mascara, destroying the perfect makeup that was part of her armor. When she spoke, her voice was small and broken, nothing like the commanding tone she'd wielded like a weapon minutes before. "I changed my name," she whispered, "when I came to America, when the refugee agency found me a foster family. They said it would be easier to assimilate with an American name, that Vivienne was close enough to sound familiar, but different enough to help me forget, to start over, to become someone new." She opened her eyes, looked at Russell with an expression that held more pain than any physical wound. I kept the dog tag. I kept the picture. I told myself it was to remember where I came from, to remember what I'd survived. But really, her voice broke. Really, I kept them to remember that someone had thought I was worth saving, that for 6 days, someone had treated me like I mattered, like my life had value. Russell couldn't move, couldn't process what he was hearing. The child he'd saved, the little girl who'd woven him a bracelet from hospital blanket threads, had grown into this woman. This woman who'd looked at him with contempt, who'd called him mediocre, who'd said people like him were what was wrong with the world. The cognitive dissonance was so extreme, it felt like drowning, like being pulled under by a riptide, while someone on shore insisted the water was calm. "You kept the dog tag," Russell said slowly, trying to make sense of it, trying to find a narrative that explained how gratitude could transform into contempt. "You kept the picture. You remembered. And then you—" He stopped, unable to finish the sentence, unable to put into words the betrayal that felt almost worse than if she'd simply forgotten him entirely. "I became everything I swore I wouldn't," Vivienne said, crying openly now, not trying to hide it or maintain control. "The foster family that took me in, they were wealthy. They gave me everything: education, opportunity, a path out of poverty. And I was so grateful, so desperate to prove I deserved it, that I absorbed their worldview, absorbed their contempt for people who struggled, who didn't pull themselves up by their bootstraps like I did. I became the model immigrant, the refugee success story. I went to Yale. I got my MBA. I climbed the corporate ladder by being smarter and more ruthless than everyone around me. And somewhere along the way, I forgot." Her voice broke completely. "I forgot that I used to be the person people looked through, the refugee child, the charity case, the one who survived because someone happened to have the right blood type and happened to care more about saving lives than following protocol." She moved toward him, hands raised in surrender or plea. "I convinced myself I'd earned everything, that my success was purely merit, purely hard work. I looked at people struggling and told myself they just weren't trying hard enough, weren't smart enough, weren't willing to make the sacrifices I'd made. And I never—" She pressed a hand to her chest, as if trying to hold something inside that wanted to escape. "I never let myself think about the sacrifices other people made for me. The soldier who gave me 3 pints of blood when he should have been recovering from his own injuries. The nurses who stayed past their shifts to monitor me. The refugee workers who found me placement when thousands of others were waiting. I took all of that and turned it into a story about individual achievement, about deserving success, about earning my place. And anyone who didn't achieve what I achieved, anyone who was still struggling, clearly just wasn't trying hard enough." Russell stared at his dog tag, trying to reconcile the little girl who'd woven him a bracelet with the woman who'd told him he smelled like chemicals, who'd said he was taking up space that competent people could use. Tried to understand how gratitude could curdle into contempt, how being saved could somehow make you forget that salvation required a savior, that survival was rarely solo. "I was deployed 9 more times after Mosul," Russell said quietly. "Came home with damage that never healed. Met my wife at a VA hospital, had a daughter. Then my wife died overseas on my last deployment. I came home to raise Brooke alone, to work whatever job gave insurance and flexibility." He held up the dog tag. "And tonight, the child I saved told me I was mediocre, that I was what's wrong with America, told me to use a tissue because she didn't want to touch what my hands had been on." Vivienne flinched. "I didn't know it was you, but that's not an excuse. I should have remembered everyone has a story. That the janitor could be a veteran, a father doing his best, someone who once saved a child. I should have remembered because I was that child. But I spent 20 years training myself to not see, to not care, to not acknowledge that circumstances don't define worth. Russell thought about the last time he'd seen Rasha, 8 years old, recovering, eating MRE crackers. She'd looked at him and said in halting English, "You good person, you make world better." He'd laughed, said he was just doing his job. She'd shaken her head. Good people choose job that make world better. You choose save people. That make you good. He'd carried those words through 9 more deployments, through Rachel's death, through 4 years of being invisible. And now that child stood before him, having forgotten them completely. "I can't undo this," Vivienne said. "Can't take back what I said. I've become someone who would look down on the 8-year-old refugee I was. Someone who'd call her mediocre for not assimilating fast enough. I convinced myself I deserved everything through merit. But I never acknowledged I was only able to work hard because you gave me the chance. I took all that privilege and turned it into contempt for anyone without the same opportunities. I became the villain in my own story, the person 8-year-old me would have hated." Russell wanted to walk away, to leave her drowning, but he remembered holding a little girl's hand while she cried, the way she'd trusted him absolutely. "My daughter asks if I'm ashamed of my job," Russell said. "I tell her, honest work is never shameful. That dignity comes from how you treat people. But tonight, having you look at me like I'm dirty, it made me ashamed. Not of the work, but that I've let people like you make me feel invisible. I'm sorry," Vivienne whispered, "for tonight, for every time I walked past you without seeing you, for every decision that treated employees like resources instead of people, for becoming someone who would spit on the refugee child I was. I can't undo any of it, but I can try to become someone different, someone who remembers, someone who honors what you did." Russell studied her, looking for manipulation. But he saw only raw grief. "What does that mean? Beyond apologies?" Vivienne's hands shook. "I have resources, influence. I can hire back the 300 employees, fund accessibility features properly, resurrect the veterans program." She pulled out her checkbook. "Your daughter. The surgery. How much?" Russell felt cold. "I'm not asking for money." "I know. You didn't ask. I'm offering. 21 years ago, you gave me blood without asking for anything. You gave me 6 days. You gave me your dog tag and told me I was brave. I never thanked you. Never tried to find you." She wrote quickly. "So I'm offering. Not as payment. As acknowledgement. As the beginning of trying to be better." She held out the check, $80,000. "Taking this makes me feel like I'm cashing in on saving your life," Russell said. "That's not who I am. I'm not offering because you saved my life. I'm offering because your daughter deserves care, and you shouldn't destroy yourself working to provide it. The system that makes healthcare this expensive is broken, and I've benefited from broken systems without questioning them. I want to be the person 8-year-old me believed existed." Russell stared at the check. Years of exhaustion in those zeros. "I want something else. Keep your money. Use it to fix what you broke. Hire back those employees. Fund accessibility. Create a real veterans program. And remember, not just me. Every person you don't see. I want you to look at them and remember, they all have stories. That their worth isn't defined by job titles." Vivienne lowered the check. "That doesn't help your daughter. My daughter needs a father who can tell her dignity isn't negotiable, that we don't compromise our values when convenient." He picked up the dog tag, then set it back down. "Keep wearing it, but actually remember what it means." "Then let me give you a job," Vivienne said desperately. "Not charity. You're teaching yourself Python while working nights. What are you building?" Russell hesitated. "Accessibility app for kids with disabilities. Games that adapt to mobility levels, speech to text, audio descriptions. I've been building it 2 years, using Brooke as my test user. It's not professional. Just something I made because educational software wasn't designed for kids like her. Vivienne's eyes lit up. Show me tomorrow. 9 a.m. Bring your laptop, bring Brooke if needed. And bring your employment contract. I'm hiring you as head of accessibility development. We'll take what you've built and turn it into something that helps thousands of kids, properly funded, properly staffed. Russell felt dizzy. I don't have a degree, no credentials. You taught yourself to code while working nights and raising a daughter alone. You're a veteran who spent 20 years saving lives. You saw a problem and solved it. That's more than half my employees with fancy degrees. She approached him. Let me do this. Not for you, for me. I need to believe I can be better, that it's not too late to honor who I used to be. Russell looked at her for a long moment, at the CEO and the 8-year-old, at the woman who'd forgotten and the girl who'd remembered. 9 a.m. tomorrow. I'll bring the laptop, but I want it in writing. A contract guaranteeing accessibility features stay funded even without immediate profit, a real veterans program, and a commitment to see all your employees as human beings. Done, Vivienne said immediately. Legal will draft contracts tonight. Russell nodded. He turned to leave, paused at the door. That bracelet you made me from hospital threads, I still have it. In a box with my commendations and my wife's funeral flag. Things I can't look at but can't throw away. I kept it because it reminded me that sometimes the people we save remember us. He met her eyes. Don't make me regret keeping it. Don't make me regret believing that girl still exists inside you. Vivienne pressed her hand over where the dog tag hung. I won't. I swear. Russell left and made his way through corridors he'd cleaned for 4 years. But something had shifted. He wasn't invisible anymore. He'd saved a life and 21 years later had saved her again, from becoming irredeemable. Brooke was awake at the kitchen table, homework spread around her. Dad, you're early. Change of plans. Russell sat across from her. How's homework? Hard. The math doesn't make sense. She gestured at eraser marks. I'm too slow. You're brilliant, Russell said sharply. The teaching doesn't match how you learn. That's the system's failure, not yours. That's just what parents say. It's what someone who just got offered a real job says. Brooke's eyes widened. Really? Tell me. Russell told her about the phone, the confrontation, the dog tag and photograph. He left out the harsh words, but told the important parts. That people you save remember. That compassion changes lives unpredictably. That people can choose to be better. So you saved her as a kid, and now she's helping us? Brooke said. Our app. You've been testing it. This is yours, too. Brooke was quiet. Dad, are you going to take the surgery money if she offers again? Russell had wondered if she'd figure that out. I don't know. Part of me says it's wrong, but part says, you deserve care, and pride is a luxury. I don't want you proud and poor, Brooke said. I want to stop limping. I want to run. I want you to stop working yourself to exhaustion because I'm broken. You're not broken. You're challenged differently. But broken means unfixable, and you're the strongest person I know. Then let her help. Not because you saved her, but because she has money, and we need it, and sometimes accepting help is brave. Russell looked at his daughter, who'd lost her mother, and learned to navigate a cruel world. Okay, if she offers tomorrow, I'll accept. For you. Brooke smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. Good. And Dad? You need to stop smelling like bleach. Russell laughed. Tomorrow, I'll smell like coffee and stress like everyone else. Better. Now let's go shopping. You need a new suit. Can't show up in your janitor uniform. That night, Russell let himself hope. Hope that the app could help thousands. that Brooke would walk without pain, that Vivienne would follow through, that choosing compassion 21 years ago had mattered in ways that rippled forward through time. At 9 a.m., Russell entered Vivienne's office in the discount suit Brooke had bullied him into buying. Brooke was with him, insisting she see where her father would work. Vivienne was already there, her desk covered in contracts, testifying to a sleepless night, making promises binding. She looked up and her eyes went to Brooke, to the limp, to the too old awareness. Vivienne's CEO mask cracked completely. She saw herself in another child who'd learned life wasn't fair. "You must be Brooke," Vivienne said softly, coming around the desk. "I'm Vivienne. Your father saved my life long ago. Now I'm going to try to honor what he did by helping you get everything you need." Brooke shook her hand. "He says you used to be Rasha, that you survived a bombing, that you were brave." I was terrified. "But your father told me I was brave, and I believed him." "Just like you can trust him. And just like I hope you'll learn to trust me. I don't deserve it. But I'd like to earn it." She turned to Russell, held out a thick folder. "Everything you asked for. In writing. Accessibility program fully funded 5 years minimum. Veterans program with resources. And," she pulled out a check. "For Brooke's surgery. Not payment. Not charity. Just acknowledgement that you gave me life, and I want to help give your daughter the same. Please." Russell looked at the check, at Brooke's hopeful face, at Vivienne's desperate sincerity. He took it, folded it carefully. "Thank you. For remembering, for choosing to be better, for giving me a chance to do work that matters." "No," Vivienne said fiercely. "Thank you. For saving me twice, in Mosul, and last night, when you could have walked away." 3 months later, Russell presented the accessibility app at a veterans conference. Brooke sat front row, surgery successful, limp gone, smile unguarded. Vivienne sat beside her, now volunteering with refugee organizations, having replaced half her executive team with people who understood profit and compassion, weren't mutually exclusive. The app was being adopted nationwide, helping thousands of kids who'd been told their struggles were their fault. After the presentation, a young veteran approached. "Mr. Kane, I heard you're hiring. Just discharged. Medical issues. I was a combat medic. No degree, but I'll learn anything. I just need a chance." Russell looked at him, at the familiar exhaustion, fear, desperate pride. The ghost of who he'd been 4 years ago. "What's your name?" "Patterson. Alex Patterson." "Welcome to the team, Alex. We need people who understand fighting for what matters. When can you start?" "Tomorrow. Don't be late." Russell clapped his shoulder. The gesture of soldiers who understood touch meant more than words. As Alex walked away, Brooke appeared at Russell's side. "You gave him a chance. Like Ms. Cross gave you, like you gave her when she was little. That's how it works, Brooke. You save someone, they save someone else. It connects. It matters. None of it's ever really over." Brooke squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you, Dad." Russell's throat tightened. "I'm proud of you too, for being braver than I was, for reminding me accepting help is strength." Across the room, Vivienne caught Russell's eye and smiled, not the CEO's practiced expression, but genuine. She raised her hand to her chest, pressed fingers where Russell's dog tag still hung beneath her blouse, a reminder of who she'd been and chosen to become. Russell nodded in acknowledgement, in forgiveness, in the complicated grace of understanding people were always becoming, always choosing who they wanted to be. Surrounded by veterans finding purpose, and refugees finding community, and children discovering they were capable of more than the world told them, Russell understood that every choice to save someone, to see someone, to offer kindness when cruelty was easier, every choice mattered more than any medal. The choice to slam a phone down instead of staying silent. To offer grace instead of revenge. To let people save you back. All connected. All mattered. None possible without one 21-year-old medic deciding a dying refugee child was worth blood and time. No questions asked. That was the legacy Russell built. Not just an app or program, but a world where invisibility wasn't survival's cost, where accepting help wasn't weakness, where people you saved might save you back. A world where kindness was transformational, rippling forward through decades, proving good people existed, good choices mattered, and sometimes, if you were brave and lucky, the world became better because you'd been in it.